Episode 1, The Flame That Wouldn't Die. They buried Eleanor on a Tuesday. Rain fell like it had been waiting for her. Quiet, cold, heavy with the kind of silence only a sudden death can bring. She had been the kind of girl who made others feel closer to God, not because she preached, but because she looked at you like He was watching through her eyes. Now her photo Saturday beside the altar, and beside the photo, a single white candle. We all left the church just before dark. The organ played her favorite hymn as the doors closed, and I told myself it was over. But when I returned later that night alone, because I couldn't sleep, because something in me didn't feel finished, I found it, the candle, still burning, strong, bright, unbothered by the draft that made the pews creak like bones in old coffins. At first, I thought it was just stubborn wax. Maybe the wick was thick, maybe someone had relit it. But the sacristy was locked. No one had come back. And when I moved closer, I swear, the flame leaned toward me, not like fire usually does, not random. It tilted as if it saw me, as if it was waiting. I backed away. That night, I dreamed of Eleanor, not her face, her voice. She didn't speak in words, just breath and weeping and something like scraping glass. I woke to the smell of smoke. Packed, I ran downstairs. But the house was dark, cold. Only one thing stood out, a fine trail of wax, starting at the front door and ending at my bed. I returned to the church the next morning. The candle was still burning. Its wax had not spilled. Its flame had not dimmed. I asked Father Thomas. He said he tried to snuff it out twice. The first time, the flame returned. The second time, his fingers blistered. He told me, sometimes, light isn't from heaven. Sometimes, it's from something that doesn't want to be forgotten. 3 days passed. The candle still stood. A photo of Eleanor began to warp at the edge from heat, but as if the flame was rewriting her face. And on the seventh night, I stayed in the church past midnight, not to pray, not to grieve, but to ask a question. I whispered to the candle, "Why are you still burning?" And in the faintest flicker of light, I saw it, a shadow behind the flame, not mine. Not anyone's. It stood still, head bowed, as if mourning or waiting for someone to light the rest. Episode 2. She whispered through the flame. They say fire crackles, that it dances, flickers, sighs. But that night, the candle didn't crackle. It whispered, and it whispered her name. It was just past a.m. That chapel was empty. Not even the usual groans of old wood or the occasional rustle of wind. Just me, my dark, and that candle, still burning, untouched, unyielding. I had started recording it out of desperation, not for proof, not for logic, just to convince myself I wasn't losing my mind. I placed my old cassette recorder on the pew beside me, pressed RERD, and whispered, "If you're there, Eleanor, say something." The flame flinched, not from breath, from recognition. It tilted slightly again toward me, a quiet pulse, then still. I stayed until dawn, heard nothing with my ears. But when I played back the tape, my blood frowncy. It started with silence, static, the kind that makes your bones itch. Then, a sound, like soft wind curling through a confession booth. And 10, a voice, her voice. I'm not gone. Hit, light, underneath, not buried. The voice was warped, like it had to push through something thick and sacred just to reach me. But it was her. The way she said underneath, it was the same tremble she used when she used to cry during prayers. Only now, it didn't sound like she was crying. It sounded like she was drowning. I replayed it 5 times. Each time, I caught something new. A gasp, a scrape, a faint ringing like tiny bells underwater. And then, after the final word, there was a sound I hadn't noticed before. A breath, not mine, not hers, but something else, heavy, right next to the mic. Listening, I brought the tape to Father Thomas the next day. He didn't listen, he just stared at the cassette and asked me a question that made the hair rise on my neck. Did she speak through the flame or from it? I asked him what difference it made. He said, because if it came through, she might still be herself. But if it came from, then the flame isn't just remembering her, it's using her. That night, I went back. I knelt before the candle. No prayers, just one plea. Eleanor, if you're still there, tell me the truth." The flame bowed again, and then flickered twice, and in that soft hiss of fire-licking air, I heard it, so faint I don't know if it was real or if she was already inside me. He buried the wrong body. Episode 3. The priest who tried to blow it out. They said Father Marin had nerves of steel, that he once held a dying man's hand in a burning house and didn't flinch, that no exorcism ever shook him, no scream ever made him pray faster than his heartbeat. But the night he tried to blow out Eleanor's candle, he cried, not from fear, from something worse. He arrived just after sunset, cloaked damp from rain, eyes tired from too many nights pretending sleep. He didn't ask questions, didn't want to hear recordings. He walked straight down the center aisle, past the empty pews and cracked statues, to the altar where Eleanor's portrait still sat smiling softly for someone buried. The candle burned beside her, unmoving, unyielding, watching. "This ends tonight," he muttered. He leaned down, drew a long breath, and blew. The flame danced, but it didn't die. He blew again harder, his cheeks hollowed from the force. The flame flickered, then surged taller, brighter, and 10. Father Marin screamed. He clutched his lips, stumbling backward into the first pew. Blood spilled between his fingers. The skin around his mouth was cracked, burned, as if he'd kissed boiling iron. I rushed to him. His hands trembled violently, and when I asked what happened, he whispered, voice hoarse, eyes wide, "I saw her. When I blew into the flame, it blew back." Later, after I'd bandaged him and calmed his shivering, he told me everything. He said when he tried to extinguish it, he didn't just feel heat. He saw a place, not hell, not heaven, but a room, a sealed stone room, no doors, no windows, and Eleanor, sitting at the center of it, mouth sewn shut, eyes open with screaming from the inside, and around her were candles, thousands, but only one burned, ours, and she looked at him through it, not begging, not accusing, just waiting. Father Marin tried to leave town that same night, but at the edge of the chapel courtyard, his car stopped, battery dead, engine frowning, and when he looked back toward the church, the candle was still visible through the stained glass, burning brighter than ever. He left the next morning without a word, no sermon, no final prayer, no blessing, just a scorched Bible left behind, open to a single verse. Do not quench the spirit. 1 Thessalonians 5:19. I now sleep with the cassette recorder on, not to capture her voice, but to hear the moment it stops, because Father Marin said one more thing before he left. A whisper, almost ashamed. The candle isn't burning for her anymore. It's burning for whoever tries to put it out. Episode 4. The flame that bled on the Bible. The Bible was supposed to be safe, untouchable, a barrier between us and whatever flitted too close. But that morning, I found it bleeding, not metaphorically, not in visions, dripping, thick, red, and the candle still burned beside it, unchanged, unmoved, like it had seen worse. It was Sister Evangeline who first noticed it. She came to clean the altar at dawn, polish the chalices, refresh the linens, just like she had for the past 27 years. She never screamed, not even when she buried her twin brother, not even when lightning struck the bell tower. But today, she screamed. I arrived moments later. She stood at the altar, hands over her mouth, tears wetting her veil. She pointed. The Bible, our ceremonial one, the one bound in white leather and edged in gold, was open. We never left it open, especially not at that passage. Revelation 20, the final judgment. Its pages were soaked seeping red, as if the words themselves had begun to bleed. The liquid ran like slow tears from the binding, pooling at the base of the candle, but the wax didn't melt into it. The flame didn't flinch, as if it recognized the offering. I reached for the pages, not out of bravery, out of need. The red was warm, not sticky, not blood, but it wasn't ink either. Somewhere between memory and flesh, like whatever it was, had bled before. And just as my fingers grazed the text, the candle pulsed, once, like a heartbeat. Then came the voice, not from behind me, not beside me, from inside the chapel walls. Low, male, ancient. The book speaks of what's to come, but what if she died reading what was never meant to be read? That night, I returned alone. I opened the Bible to the exact same passage. It was clean, no stain, no blood, but the word lamb had been scratched out. Only that, carved so deep into the page. The mark bled through 5 layers of scripture, and in its place, a symbol burned into the parchment. A single eye, open, crying flame. I confronted Father Thomas. He didn't speak. He only handed me a paper from Eleanor's confirmation ceremony. On the back, in her handwriting, were the words, "There's another gospel, one no one dares to preach," and I think I read it by accident. So now I sit in front of that candle again, and I wonder, was the flame lit by grief or by scripture that shouldn't have survived? And if Eleanor saw what's after judgment, then maybe this candle isn't mourning her at all. Maybe it's waiting for the rest of us to catch up. Episode 5. The woman who came to pray and cry wax. She came just before midnight, wearing a dark green shawl, no umbrella, though the rain fell like nails. We locked the chapel hours before, but somehow she was already inside, kneeling in front of the candle. The flame glowed brighter than I'd ever seen, almost white, like it was recognizing her, like it had waited. I don't know her name. I don't know how she got in, but I remember how she prayed. Not with words, with trembling, with breath that shook the benches beside her, and with tears, only they weren't water. It took me a second to understand, to step close enough in the dim to see what rolled down her cheeks. Thick, golden, wax, not metaphor, not illusion, actual melted wax, spilling from her tear ducts, steaming slightly as it hit the floor. She didn't scream, didn't wipe it away, she just whispered, over and over, one broken sentence. She wasn't buried, she was sealed. I wanted to ask her who she was, but something in me held back. Like if I spoke, I'd become part of her prayer, and I didn't know if I could come back from that. So I watched and listened until she slowly looked up at Eleanor's portrait. Her eyes burned in it with fire, but with something older, recognition, regret, reverence. I warned them, she said. I told them not to light anything. I asked her, finally, quietly, what is the candle? She didn't blink. She didn't need to. It's not light, she whispered. It's permission. Then she stood, and the wax on the floor cracked beneath her feet like old bones. She walked past me, low, dignified, and as she passed, I smelled something I'll never forget. Not incense, not fire, but roses soaked in smoke. She left without a word, disappeared into the rain. I tried to follow, but when I reached the door, no footprints, no wax trail, no sign she'd ever been there. Only one thing had changed. The candle was shorter. For the first time, it had burned lower, and where the wax had spilled around its base, a pattern formed, a circle, a single word in Latin at the center. Revenant, she returns. I told Father Thomas. He paled, whispered that only relics of resurrection are sealed, not buried. Eleanor wasn't supposed to come back. Not like this. Not lit. Not prayed to. Not activated. And now, we had allowed it. Episode 6, the night all other candles went out. We lit 87 candles that night, for the souls of the faithful departed, for peace, for memory, and for Eleanor. Thought no one dared say her name aloud anymore. That entire chapel glowed, like the flame itself had multiplied across wood and stone, trying to outshine the shadow we all felt growing. But deep down, we knew only one flame mattered, and it didn't burn for peace. The vigil began at sundown. Soft hymns, gentle prayers, Father Thomas's voice breaking slightly as he offered blessings over faces too tired to believe. The candle thing now called at her still stood at the altar, not flickering, not responding, just burning with the patience of something that knew it would outlast us all. Halfway through the service, a draft passed through the nave. No door opened, no window broke, but the air shifted like something breathing in, just before the scream, and then, like a single command from an unseen mouth, every candle in the chapel went out. All 87, gone, snuffed like they'd never existed. All except hers. The flames surged brighter, throwing sharp shadows along the walls, and in that sudden darkness, the candlelight revealed something no one had seen before. A row of pews along the left aisle that hadn't been there hours before. 6 of them, aged, dustless, too perfect, too clean, and in the third pew from the front, a figure, barely visible, back straight, hands folded, but the light curved around it, as if even the flame didn't want to touch it directly. People screamed, chairs scraped, some ran, some dropped to their knees. I couldn't move. I couldn't even blink, because as I looked at the figure, it looked back. I couldn't see its face, but I felt it, a gaze that didn't see my skin, my clothes, my fear. It saw what I'd buried with her. The light from the altar began to pulse, as though measured, like a heartbeat inside fire. And then, all at once, the candles relit themselves. Everyone, same height, same color, as if they'd never gone out. But the pews on the left, gone. No sign they'd ever been there, except for the faintest trace of soot on the floor, in the shape of folded hands. After the vigil, Father Thomas found a note taped to the chapel door. No handwriting, just a message scorched into parchment. Light does not comfort the condemned, it calls them. That night, I Saturday by Eleanor's candle again. It burned calmly, content, and just as I turned to leave, I saw a reflection in the glass of the altar. Not my own, not hers, but a man with no face, wearing my clothes. Episode 7. The Confession Hidden in Wax. Wax shouldn't move like that, not with intention, not with meaning, but hers did. One drop at a time, and each drop spelled something. I wish I had never learned to read. It started 3 nights after the vigil, when the chapel emptied and silence returned like fog through broken windows. I stayed late, again, not for prayer, not for peace, but because the candle had begun to change. It no longer dripped wax randomly. The trails it left were deliberate, too even, too symmetrical. So I laid parchment beneath it, blank sheets, one each night, let it fall where it wanted, and by the 7th night, the wax had formed a letter. The first was in H, then in E, then L. By the 4th night, the letter was I, and that's when I stopped pretending it was a coincidence. By the 7th night, it read, he lied. I wanted to ignore it, to sweep it away like ashes. But that night, the flame burned blue, cold and low, like a warning, like a dare. So I asked it aloud, who lied? The flame didn't answer, but the wax moved against the windless air, dragging the softened letters until they reshaped themselves into a full sentence. He lied to save his soul. I brought the sheets to Father Thomas. He looked pale, older than I'd ever seen him. He told me to burn them, right then, right there. But I didn't, because his hands were shaking. Because when I whispered, "Is it about you?" he didn't deny it. He just whispered back, "I heard her last confession. I chose not to write it down." I asked why, and his answer was quieter than the flame itself. Because if the church knew what she said, they would have never buried her under hallowed ground. That night, I returned to the candle, and the wax had changed again. No longer letters, just a spiral, tight, endless, leading inward like a well with no bottom. And at the center of that spiral, the wax cracked, and something inside glimmered. I pried it open. It was a tooth, small, human, burned black on one side. And I knew it wasn't from her mouth. It was confession made flesh, something someone tried to hide. I placed the tooth on the altar. The flame curved toward it angrily, then straightened, like it had fed. And just before I turned to leave, a new line appeared in fresh wax on the parchment. You're next to confess. Episode 8. The shadow that Saturday in the pew. I knew I wasn't alone, even before I saw it. There's a kind of silence that bends, like it's making room for something that shouldn't be there. And that night, the pews creaked, not from what's settling, but from someone taking a seat. It was just past 3 a.m. That chapel was cold, heavy with the scent of melted wax and something older, something sweet and rotting. The candle still burned on the altar, its flame now thin and high, like a blade. I had come back hoping for answers. What did Eleanor mean? Who lied? Why did the wax remember things no one had said out loud? And then I heard it, one slow breath, from the third pew on the left. I turned, expecting emptiness, but there bathed in half-light Saturday a figure, still, unmoving, just watching. I couldn't see its face, only the outline of a head, shoulders slightly slouched, hands folded. It didn't speak, it didn't blink, but somehow, It leaned closer without moving at all, like its very existence pressed in, not toward my body, toward my guilt. I stepped forward. My voice cracked before I even said a word. "Who are you?" No answer. But as I approached the pew, the candle behind me flared, and the figure vanished. Not disappeared, disintegrated, like ash disturbed by truth. Only one thing remained where it had been, a small piece of cloth, black, velvet, and stitched into it, in red thread. Bless me, for I have watched. I returned to the altar. The candle was now dripping wax faster than ever. It poured down onto the marble floor, forming shapes, no longer letters, not quite symbols. It took me a moment to understand what I was seeing. They were faces, familiar ones, people from the congregation, people who had stopped coming, people who had all Saturday in that same pew. On the night of the vigil, I called Father Thomas the next morning. He didn't answer, but he sent a message, a single sentence. "Don't let the shadow sit again." That's where he listens. I haven't seen the shadow since, but every time I sit in that pew, I feel breath on my neck, a slow exhale, like something remembering how I prayed. And now, when the candle burns low, the flame leans toward that side of the church, like it's still feeding on the echo of whoever sat there, or whoever still does. Episode 9. The grave that refused to settle. We buried her once, just once, but the earth never agreed, because some graves don't close. Not when the truth is still breathing, not when the soul inside wasn't done speaking. It began with a sound, a small, crumbling sigh like dirt giving up. Mr. Lanston, the groundskeeper, heard it first. He'd gone to water the roses near Eleanor's plot. Simple, routine, until he tripped, because the ground under her tombstone had sunk 2 inches overnight. No rain, no digging, just recession, as if something underneath was breathing out. They tried to refill it 3 times, but each morning, the same thing. The soil displaced, the edges of her grave cracked, spreading outward like veins, as if the ground itself was trying to remember where it once ended. I visited it myself on the 3rd night, just past midnight. The moon was high, but the grave cast no shadow, not even from the headstone. The grass around it had died, not yellowed, blackened, charred, though no fire had touched it, and in the center of the cracked dirt was a single drop of wax. I didn't bring the candle, I swear to God, but there it was like it had bled its way here. I bent down and touched it. It was warm, still soft, still melting, and suddenly beneath my hand, the dirt moved, not sank, shifted, as if something beneath was rolling over in discomfort, or worse, turning to face upward. I staggered back, nearly fell into the open earth. That's when I saw them, fingerprints, pressed into the inside edge of the grave, dragged upward, clawing toward the surface, not frantic, measured, like the person buried below wasn't trying to escape, just reminding us she was still aware. Father Thomas met me the next morning with eyes that looked like they hadn't closed in days. I told him what I saw. He only said, "Some burials are symbolic. You don't bury what isn't finished, you contain it." I asked him what we buried. "If not Eleanor." He said nothing, but handed me a folded note he'd found wedged into her coffin the day they lowered it. One sentence, in her handwriting: "If I wake too soon, blow out the light." But we didn't. We never did. And now the ground won't hold her. The roots rot, the marble sweats, and every night, that candle on the altar burns just a little brighter, as if it's pulling her back piece by piece, or worse, preparing us for what she's bringing with her. Episode 10. The Angel Who Looked Away. The statue never moved before. It had stood for over 60 years, wings stretched high, sword raised, eyes cast downward in eternal vigilance. Saint Michael, guardian of the sanctuary, protector, avenger, carved in white marble, solid and holy. But tonight, he turned his face. I was the last to leave the chapel. The candle had burned lower than ever before, but still, it hadn't gone out. I stood near the altar, watching it flicker, thin, pale, but alive, like a dying breath that refused to release. Then I heard it, a faint grinding, stone, heavy, sickeningly slow. I turned and saw that Michael's head, once bowed in watchfulness, now tilted to the left, away from the candle, At first I thought I was imagining it. The mind plays tricks when soaked in grief. But then I looked down. The pedestal was cracked, not chipped, not worn, split straight down the center like the foundation had tried to resist the movement, and one when his right was fractured at the edge, as if even his own form had recoiled at what it was turning from. I rushed to Father Thomas. He came with a flashlight, silent the entire walk back. When he saw it, he didn't gasp, didn't pray. He only said he faced hell for centuries and never flinched. Whatever made him turn his face wasn't from hell. We reviewed the chapel footage. There was nothing, no figure, no hand, no quake. But at 3:16 a.m., the camera shook violently and frenzy for exactly 7 seconds. And when the feed resumed, Michael's head was turned. His sword had fallen split from his grip, lying into clean pieces at the base. That night, the candle's flame bent sharp light pointing not upward, but toward the statue. And in that slanted light, a shadow appeared on the wall behind it. Not the angel, not mine, but Eleanor's, or something wearing her outline, but taller, too tall, her arms too long, her hair moving though there was no wind, and her head tilted in the exact same direction as the angel's. When I blinked, the shadow was gone, but a smell lingered, not sulfur, not incense, myrrh, strong, sweet, decaying, the oil of burial, the perfume of the anointed dead. I told myself it was a sign that maybe she was trying to warn us that something was coming, but deep down, I knew the truth. Saint Michael turned his face, not in warning, but in shame, because even heaven has secrets, and one of them is now awake, watching us through candlelight. Episode 11. The final prayer she never finished. I found the prayer folded inside her hymnal, tucked deep between pages that had turned soft from years of tears and incense. It wasn't printed, it wasn't even finished, but even incomplete, it shook the flame. I wasn't looking for it, I was just searching for something, anything to feel close to her again, something untouched by the funeral, the whispers, the flame. The hymnal still smelled like her, lavender and ash, pages marked by the oils of her fingers. She always held every line like it might disappear if she read it too fast. Then I saw it, a scrap of paper, aged at the edges, folded in three, delicate, intentional. I unfolded it with care. The writing was unmistakably hers, tight, elegant, almost trembling. But the words, they didn't sound like her. They sounded older, like they had been given to her, not written by her. Only the top half was complete. Let not the eyes of heaven open until the name is undone. Let not the trumpet sound if the candle still stands. Let not the saints turn their faces until the wax bleeds clear. Then it stopped, mid-sentence, as if her hand had been pulled away, or she realized what she was writing was not meant to be finished. I took the paper to Father Thomas. He read it once, twice, then sat it down like someone had punched the breath out of him. This isn't a prayer, he said. It's a seal, he explained, slowly, carefully. There are words that don't invoke God, but hold something God tried to forget, rituals buried in silence, verses that bend reality, prayers not for salvation, but for containment. That night, I placed the paper beneath the candle, and the flame reacted, not with warmth, not with light. It shrank, sank inward, turned black at the tip, and, the wax began to spew backward. It didn't drip, it crawled, traced along the altar like a living thing, forming a circle. At its center, 3 Latin letters emerged from the wax. N-O-N. I asked aloud. Not what? No reply, but the room grew darker, not just in light, in spirit, in weight, in meaning. I turned back to the paper, and now, beneath the last unfinished line, new words had appeared, words she didn't write, words that hadn't been there before. Finish it, and you finish me. I left the chapel in silence, because now I know the flame isn't keeping her alive, it's holding her back. And if I complete the prayer, if I speak what's left unsaid, then Eleanor may finally rest, but something else won't. Episode 12. The flame that lit the wrong world. Candles are meant to illuminate what's here, to chase away shadows, to comfort, to remind us we are not alone in the dark. But Eleanor's candle didn't light our world, it revealed another, and once it started, it refused to stop. It began the night. I tried to finish the prayer. I didn't speak the words, not aloud, but I traced them silently with my finger across the old parchment. As I reached the final half-written line, the candle flared, as if sensing that the seal whatever it held back was cracking, and then something strange happened. That chapel, once dim and golden, began to shift color, not darker, not brighter, just wrong. The light from the candle bent the space around it. The air shimmered, like heat over a desert road, but cold, painfully cold. And the shadows, they didn't stretch away from the flame. They moved toward it. I turned to the windows, and outside, the world was missing. The moon was gone. The trees stood still, not swaying, not breathing. The stars had vanished, and in their place, a sky that pulsed deep red, like the inside of a wound. The altar cracked, not loudly, just a quiet, groaning fracture, like it had finally grown tired of holding back. The wax at the base of the candle melted in reverse, crawling upward instead of down, and in the rising wax, something began to form, a shape, coiling, shifting like a hand trying to remember how to be a hand. Then I heard her voice, not soft, not like before, but strong, commanding, no longer entirely hers. You laid in love, but love isn't always loyal. I stepped back. The flame leaned toward me, and for the first time, I understood. It wasn't Eleanor I had been speaking to all this time. It was something wearing her memory, clothed in her voice, dripping pieces of her soul like bait. Suddenly, all the other candles in the chapel lit themselves, but not in gold or white. In black, jet black flames, flickering without heat. No shadows, no smoke, just hunger. And the world outside the windows began to hum, low, like 8,000 monks chanting backward from beneath the earth. I ran. I don't remember how, but I left the chapel and stumbled into the street. And the moment I crossed the threshold, the sky turned normal. The stars returned. The trees moved again. I looked back. Inside the chapel, only her candle burned. Everything else had gone out. And on the inside of the glass doors, smeared in wax, was a message. One more step, and it's not just her who returns. I thought I was summoning Eleanor. I thought I was helping her rest. But I think now, she was the price, not the purpose. And the flame, it never wanted peace. It wanted a doorway, and I lit it. Episode 13, the light that shouldn't have been remembered. I should have let the light die. I should have let memory be memory, and left Eleanor to rest in the quiet mercy of forgetting. But I didn't. I stared too long, listened too deeply, lit a flame that wasn't meant to be seen again, and now it remembers me. The final night came quietly, no thunder, no omens, just stillness thick, waiting, pregnant with return. I entered the chapel alone. The air felt thinner, like the walls had been holding their breath for too long. The candle was a stub now barely taller than a finger, and yet its flame towered, thin as a blade, white as bone. It didn't flicker. It watched. I brought the final page, the prayer Eleanor never finished. I placed it beside the flame, and it did not burn. The fire curled away from the paper like it feared what was written, or respected it, or recognized it. Then the doors of the chapel closed behind me, not slammed, just shut, and I heard her voice. Thank you for remembering me. But it wasn't gratitude. It was completion. The flame pulsed once, then again, and then the chapel changed. Not visibly, not with noise, but in presence, as if something massive had stepped into the room. Without touching the floor, the pews warped, the statues wept wax, and the crucifix above the altar turned upside down on its own hook. Not a fall, a decision. The light grew, so bright I couldn't see. It filled every corner, every shadow, every doubt. But it wasn't warm. It was empty, a divine absence so overwhelming. I fell to my knees and wept, and in that light, I saw her, Eleanor, but not as I remembered. Her skin shimmered like cracked porcelain, her eyes glowing with life, but with remembrance. Not of me, not of her family, but of a world before this one. She walked forward. The flame followed her, not a candle anymore, a thread stretching from the wick into her chest, like it had been tied to her soul since birth. They tried to bury the light, she said, but light like this burns backward. She reached out to me. Her hand was cold and burning all at once. You gave me memory. I give you what lies beneath it. And, 10, everything stopped. When I woke, it was dawn. The chapel was in ruins. The statues crumbled. The pews scorched. Only one thing remained untouched. The candle, unlit, melted down to the base. A final curl of smoke rising like a soulless mist. And on the altar, carved deep into the stone where wax had once pooled, the flame is gone, but what it showed never forgets. I don't sleep anymore. Not really, because when the lights are off, I still see that brightness. Too bright to be holy. And sometimes, I smell the wax, hear a match strike, feel heat blooming behind my back. I haven't lit another candle since. Not for prayer, not for mourning, because now I know some lie.